This is the I'm Giving Notice podcast, episode 4.
This is the I'm Giving Notice podcast, where you get to take control of life's big three and have the career, relationships, and health that you've always dreamed of. Now, get ready to say, I'm Giving Notice, with your host, Mace Haroff.
Hello, this is Mace Haroff, and welcome to the I'm Giving Notice podcast, where my guests and I help you to take control of life's big three, your career, your relationships, and your health. My guest today is Janice Daphne. Originally from South Africa, Janice is the author of Divorce, the New Little Black Book. I love the title. She is also a dynamic speaker and coach whose passion is to empower and equip individuals during the transitional phases of their lives. Janice, welcome to I'm Giving Notice.
Well, good morning, Mace. Thank you so much for having me. This is very, very exciting. Thrilled to be a part of it.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Janice. It's exciting for me, too. Look, I want to talk to you about your book, and I'm holding it in my hands. Divorce, the New Little Black Book. I love the cover, a guide through the process of divorce. There are many books that are written about divorce by mental health professionals, by attorneys, etc. What intrigued me about yours is that it's a practical guide written by someone who is not any of the above, but
right.
you're someone who went through it. And my big question to you is, what inspired you to write the book?
Who inspired me to write the book?
It's a who. It's a someone. Gee, let me guess. Let me guess. Okay. Well, tell me about that.
Okay. Go for your guess.
No. Your guess. I would think perhaps an ex-spouse.
That's people's number one response, and it really isn't. The book had really little to do with my ex-spouse.
We don't like giving credit to ex-spouses when we do something positive. Isn't that true?
Right. But I will say though, it's been 3-4 years since the divorce, and he and I in a place where we co-parent exceptionally well together. We function very, very well, and very blessed to be at this point in our journey as co-parents, because it wasn't always the case. We didn't start out that way. But who inspired me to write this book was the many women that I had I still have a very good relationship with my attorney. And she would in turn, she saw how I went through this metamorphosis of the beginning of the divorce, this wounded, emotional little bird, and then finally finding my voice, finding my feet, finding my strength, and how I went through this metamorphosis until the very end. And she had helped so many other women, but in her mind, according to her, I stood out because I came out with so much strength. I came out with so much tenacity for the future. I came out with so much vision and energy and rigor that I was going to take life on, and it was an exciting journey. I didn't come through, oh my goodness, now what?
Well, did you must have anticipated in some way that you were going to feel differently than you ultimately did. What did you anticipate? How did you expect to feel after going through the divorce process?
I had no expectation other than to be divorced. That was it. I just wanted to be divorced. And I knew that I could resurrect life on my own terms, but I just needed to get through this process. And I needed to get through it with a very clear mind and put my emotions aside. And that's how I tackled it. I tackled it like a business transaction, and then I bottled in all my emotions and I dealt with it at the end. But I will also preface that with saying I had planned my divorce for a year going into it. And during that year, I planned my exit. I was going to therapy. I was owning my stuff. I was sitting with my part of it. I was getting down to the root and the cause of the patterns that I had created in the relationship, and I owned that. And once I found empowering through that gave me a springboard to go, okay, I can do this. Not only can I do it, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to come out tops.
Well, Janice, this raises an important question. You said that you planned your divorce for a year. So during that year, this is prior to you and your former spouse discussing that a divorce was imminent. In other words, did he know what your intentions were?
he never thought that I would follow through. He never thought that I would follow through. He didn't know to the extent of what I was gathering and where I was emotionally in the relationship. I guess I played poker face very well.
So is this something that there's a lot of women out there, and there's a lot of men too. I mean, I don't want to make this just, focusing on women. There's a lot of people who are considering divorce, which when you're thinking about divorce, it's usually a sign that you need to take some kind of action to either clarify your relationship situation and to decide if this is something that you want to do. But a lot of people are thinking about it, but they're not necessarily planning such as you described. Right. So what was the transition point? Well, let me back up a little bit. In your opinion or experience, in a lot of relationships, and I guess we could really only speak about our own relationships, but what is the first sign that a relationship isn't working and you either have to fix it or get out of it?
In math, parallel lines, they go parallel to each other, and they on separate journeys, and they never quite meet. And if your lives are running parallel to each other and you never get to that meeting point, in other words, being on the same page, then you're at an impasse. You can never get on that same page unless you really sit down and be honest about what the issues are. And for everyone, the issues are unique to their situation.
Give me an example. Give me an example of the parallel lines in someone's life where they're not meeting on the same page. I mean, I can give you some from my experience, but I want to hear yours.
Where I had this fantasy of a family and a unit, and I wanted an intact family. And that was the line that I was on. And I had the preconceived notion and idea that I could really will this into being. I could really love this man enough to keep this line going. However, my former spouse was on another journey, and his journey was, I want to do things my way, and I want to have my cake and eat it too. And even though I saw the signs of the broken trust, I had my vision, and I wanted to keep going on my journey. And it came to a point where we were so far, and I couldn't ignore those signs of broken trust anymore, that I had to address the elephant in the room and eat it one piece at a time.
Well, a lot of people don't ever take that step to address the elephant in the room. A lot of people stay quiet and hope that things get better or it just goes away.
I was one of those people, Mace.
So,
I did it. I did it 9 years longer than I should have done it. And we were in and out of therapy, but if both of you aren't truly, truly honest, then you're going to continue on these parallel lines. And what came to me when I came to that impasse, or to that pivotal moment, that no more, where I pull up that doormat that says, walk all over me, and said, put one down that said, walk on by this time, was my spirit, my essence of who I am. My soul would not let me continue on in this denial anymore. It became suffocating from the inside out. And I couldn't deny it because I wasn't being authentic to me. I wasn't being true to me. And it became a very shocking reality. And it manifested in a way, in my instance, through infidelities. And it was just one too many, and I had to then own it. I had to look at it. I had to face it head on.
Well, you just said something interesting I have to ask you about. You said it was one too many.
Yeah.
And that's something which I guess is very individualized. For some people, one is too many. For some people, just the thought, just having an overly close friendship or relationship with someone which more or less crosses the line in some way, it doesn't necessarily need to go into the bedroom. But for others, it seems like there are relationships where multiple infidelities are tolerated over a period of time.
It does, and I think it comes to how some of us were raised, where you stick it out in these small, closed communities. I grew up in South Africa where divorce wasn't very prevalent when I was growing up. I look now back as an adult, and I look at some of the adult relationships around me, and I think to myself, oh my goodness, they would have been better off divorced. But it's not something that was promoted. It wasn't something that you did. You stuck it out through thick and thin. You made it work. You hung in there. And coming to the Western world and realizing how free some people can be in those decisions where they do walk away.
How do you know? How do you know if the relationship can be saved or not? How did you decide when this relationship wasn't savable? I need to start the process for divorce.
If I am completely honest, I knew from the very first infidelity. But I wanted what I wanted. I had an idea and I had a vision, and I went against my initial prompting of my spirit to walk away completely the first time. And ever since I went against that prompting, that feeling, that knowing that only you as an individual know, it's intuition, it's gut, we all have it. It's what drives us forward. And often when we listen to it, we have great success in life. When we go against it, that's when our pains and failures come. And I knew from that first time, and ever since then, it was a battle. It was a constant battle of second guessing, and no relationship should be second guessed.
One of the points you make in the book is that divorce isn't something that anyone should go through by themselves. Who did you reach out to initially?
I had 3 very close friends that I could lean on, and they were in different time zones, which was perfect. Because I could
you always had a friend available regardless of the time of day.
I highly recommend it if you have friends in different time zones.
that you should put that in the book. I don't think you had that in there.
No, but I did. And they were in different time zones, truthfully. I leaned on them, and they walked with me through the process. 2 of them were divorced. 1 of them was not. And I was fortunate enough that I trusted them. They knew me so well, and they were my sounding boards, if not just a shoulder to cry on, if not just a shoulder to lean on, and my voice of reason, because they had already gone through their experience, and now I'm going through mine. And I reached out, and I say 3 because when you go too many, I'm a big advocate for sharing. You do need a sounding board. You do not need the whole world to know your business. You just do not, because everybody has an opinion. You're allowing all those energies and decision makings into what is very private in you, to you. And it's a very important journey for you. You cannot live your life through someone else's eyes. And when you allow too many people to interject, that's exactly what it's going to be. And you can't please everybody. Everybody has an opinion of how you should do things. But at the end of the day, you're the one walking this journey.
You make the point for people not to lash out on social media. Now, this is something that is just rampant today. And a lot of times if we're on Facebook or Twitter and we see someone who is ragging on a spouse or a significant other, you're usually mortified, first of all, that they're taking this on a public platform like this. But at the same time, you're kind of drawn in because it's almost like watching a soap opera. We take this interest in people's personal lives. I guess if you have people to turn to, real people that you could call in different time zones, then you don't need to lash out on social media.
You really don't. And my good, me of all people, I do understand the hurt. I do understand that feeling of wanting to get retribution, of venting and being vindictive. And I understand those internal instincts that want to kick in because you are hurt. You are embarrassed. You are humiliated. You are hurt. However, going on social media is in such poor taste. And it says more about how wounded you are than it does about the other person's character. And if you can just rein it in, it's like when you put these things out there, there's no way of taking that back. No way of taking that back. You have to think of your family, your kids. At some point, those things get back to them. And it's just so much easier if you contain it and have people that have solid morals, that have sound values, that walk that life of integrity, that can support you through it, that can guide you and say, you know what, let's just write it out, pound a pillow, tear up a magazine if you want, if that's how it is, just to get it. Because I understand you do need to vent. Oh my goodness, I said you need to tango with your 16 by 20, because for me, it came to a point where I had to let that rage out of me. I'd bottled it in so long. And a girlfriend asked me one day at lunch, so how's things going? And I explained, oh, it's wonderful and blah, blah, blah. She says, really? I said, yeah, I still love him. And secretly, I kind of wish that maybe some things could still work out. And she says, you still love him? Why? And I said, because I do. And she persisted, and I got annoyed. And eventually she ended with, you don't love him. You just haven't raged yet. And when you get home tonight, ask yourself you've been so consumed with being this goody two-shoes Christian little girl that you haven't let it out. When you get home tonight, ask yourself this question, why you love him, and see what comes up. Well, I was very annoyed with her. And she got the picture and she stopped. But I tell you what, I went home, and when I found a moment of solitude, I did ask that question. Why do I love him? Why do I love him? Why do I love him? And what came out was shocking. It really wasn't love. It was just anger. Anger at the humiliation, anger at the hurt, anger at the discombobulation of my family unit, anger of the uncertainty of the unknown, of where I'm at, and just anger, intense anger. And I took a picture that we have in our home of the two of us, a 16 by 20. I covered up my side, and I went nuts. I pounded if I may say this, the crap out of that picture, to the point where the next day I felt like I woke up and I had done a boot camp. But I got it all out. And then I had to pray and ask for forgiveness and pray well and blessings over him, because I unleashed a lot of poison darts.
So you felt sounds like you felt a little guilty when you were saying that, for letting your real emotions out, for coming to terms with how you really felt about the whole situation, your own feelings. You felt a little guilty about that.
Sure you do, because you think you have this image. You conjure up these images. This is so unrealistic. It's just not true. And then you think, oh, I'm such a good person. I don't have these hate and rage and anger inside of me. But yeah, you do. And you have to let it out, or it's going to come out sideways in another way, in another area of your life.
Once you got honest with yourself and you realized that the marriage wasn't savable, and in the book you talked about going to counseling, and you recommend that people get counseling to make sure that they've done everything possible to try and save the marriage. But once you realized it was over, and in the book you said the counselor said to you, you could go ahead with the divorce. I think we've covered everything we could cover. You said something along those lines.
Yeah.
What was your next step? Where did you begin? And what were your biggest fears going into the divorce now that you knew it was imminent?
I began by talking to a good friend of mine who had an attorney, and I know that she spoke very highly of her attorney. And I called her up, and I got a referral, and we had a little chat on the phone. And then she gave me some background. And I went to the courthouse and picked up a divorce packet, and skimmed through it and did research on child guideline and child support, alimony, and knowing what the state that I was in, what the requirements for divorce are, and knowing the logistics of it, the timelines of it. I did all of that research. Then I went to the bank. I got some 3 months of bank statements. I found out how much was in the 401k. I found out where the investments were and what the latest statement said. I got all of that in tow. Then I started taking over the monthly budget, because up until that point, my ex-spouse was taking care of the bills. He would just pay it. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I would run the household, and I started taking over. So I knew what was coming in, what was going out. And I think a lot of women fall prey to that, where they rely on the guy to do it. In my case, it's just, I didn't want to. It wasn't a case of I didn't know how to. I just didn't want to. And I did. I took it over. I started budgeting myself, paying with cash with things, because I knew my financial landscape was about to change drastically.
How did you come to terms with that, though? Usually in a divorce, especially where one person, you were a stay-at-home mom, so he brought home the paycheck. Mm-hmm. Now the guy who is bringing home the paycheck is going to be living somewhere else. So you're dependent on him now to meet his share of the expenses to keep you whole until the divorce is over and whatever the final settlement is. Mm-hmm. How do you come to terms with that in your mind that it's going to happen? Did you sit down and have a conversation with him? In other words, were you in a situation where you didn't want to provoke or alienate him because you were still dependent on him for your support and the support of your children?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of women struggle with that. Women tend to want to be martyrs, where we say, oh, I want the divorce and all I want is just the kids in the house and I don't want anything else. And my next question to them is, okay, well, how are you going to take care of the house and the kids with nothing else? And they don't want to fight. They don't want to upset things because they think if they just keep the status quo the way that it is, that the ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse will do the honorable thing and contribute towards the household, because in reality, he really doesn't have to until he's made to by the courts. So there are many instances where you can go months. Women have gone months without anything until they eventually get to either a mediation settlement or into court before they start getting any kind of support from these guys. And they in hot water. In my situation, I had a conversation with actually a family member of his on his side, and he said to me, when we first expressed this was our intention to our immediate family, when we sat down and we expressed this is what we are planning on doing, the individual, a male on his side, said to me, you know the house, you know the budget, you know what it costs, make sure that you get yourself and the kids covered until you can get yourself up on your feet. I said, okay, how do you suggest I do that? He says, draw up a temporary agreement, a settlement agreement, and discuss it with him and get him to sign it.
And I think also he was advising you to do this as soon as possible while
Yes.
your ex-spouse still was a little bit vulnerable, while he was feeling guilty.
That's the key, and I've told the men that I've coached going through this. I have a really good friend, a guy friend who has gone through it a few months ago, and I advised him to do the same thing, and he and his spouse sat down, and they did. They drew up a temporary agreement with things that were valid in their household or what was pertinent to them, and that set their framework for the divorce. Women need to realize, women and men going through it, that there's a very small window where either spouse who is asking for the divorce does have that remorse. And this is your time to not play victim and martyr. This is your time to capitalize on it, because this is your business end. This is going to set up how you're going to take care of your kids, the kids, and going forward. And you're not being sneaky about it. You coming to them with what you need, and it's either they agree to it or they don't. It's as simple as that.
It's really about being strategic.
It is. It's being very strategic, and then if you want to get crazy and emotional, leave that for the end. But in those first 3-4 months, that is such a crucial period for you to have your wits about you and think clearly long term of how you want to set up your financial blueprint for life after divorce. Because in my case, ultimately, he did agree. He read it over. He had an attorney read it over, which was his family member read it over. He agreed to what was in it. And when we eventually did get to the final judgment, that agreement, it did come under scrutiny as time went on, and life became difficult for him, supporting 2 households. But that set up the framework for my final decree.
I would imagine
what was in it.
I would imagine that it also, assuming that he honored it, and we don't have to get into that, but when one partner makes the commitment to assist the other, whoever the bigger breadwinner is. When that person makes and demonstrates the commitment to support that person, I would imagine that it shows very favorably when you get into the courtroom and with final judgment.
And that's what his attorney advised him to do as well, is to keep going along with it.
Janice, in the book, you mentioned that everyone should start an FU fund. Now, that sounds very, very intriguing, and we probably got our listeners' attention right here. What is an FU fund?
Well, what do you think it is, Mace?
Well, I don't want to say it because I'm a gentleman. Let me think. Fun underwear. It's a fun underwear fund because obviously, if you're single, you should have fun underwear. I'm going to let you answer the question.
Right, fun underwear because we walk around in it all day long. An FU fund is what every woman should have, whether you are part-time employed, whether you are full-time employed. It's a little stash that every woman should be contributing to every time money comes in, or however you want to structure it. Stash it away, stash it away, stash it away. Because when that day comes, for whatever reason, if it's an emergency, or even in this case, if you need a little starter money to say, forget you, or F you to your ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse, you have a little nest egg. You're not flat on your back with nothing. You're not up the creek with nothing.
So it's so FU really means I've set myself up. I can survive during this period. I'm not dependent upon someone else.
Exactly.
All right. Very, very cool. So let me get into the positive side of divorce, because divorce has such a negative connotation in the world. 53% in America is the divorce rate. That's an astounding rate, which means if you get married today, you have better than a 50-50 chance of getting divorced. And of course, no one goes into marriage with the expectation that he or she is going to be divorced, but it happens. And as you describe, it's not a pleasant process to go through. But let's talk about what happens when you come out on the other side. How has life changed for you? And this could be good or bad. I want to know, how has life changed for you overall since the divorce was finalized?
It's been brilliant. It's been amazing. It's been splendid.
What's changed? What's made it all of those things?
I will say, though, there have been many valleys that I've had to walk through, but that's the way life goes. You have your valleys and you have your peaks. But at the end of the book, I say marriage to me wasn't a failure. My marriage wasn't a failure. It was my biggest blessing in disguise, because I am truly me. I'm authentically and truly free, and I am me. And I'm doing life on my terms, on how I want it. I have gleaned so many lessons about myself going through this process of how resilient one can be when you're faced with such overwhelming emotions, and sometimes you don't know what you Arthur or Martha, and you have to deal with the kids and their reactions out of it too, and you hurt for them, and you have your own hurt and to navigate it. But I will say, once you do and you come out and you find your voice, and the only way that I could do that was to be spiritually strong. And for me, that meant having a very close relationship and a very close connection with God. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about a relationship through meditation, through being quiet and listening to that voice that is inside of us, that guides us, that is wise. And the only way to hear it or get that direction or that guiding is if you are quiet enough to pay attention to it, to get that roadmap, to navigate life. And for me, that was pivotal in getting through it, and pivotal into who I am today, being that authentic me.
Do you like yourself more than you did before?
I love myself more than I did before, because I'm not compromising my values. I'm not compromising my values of how I want to live my life and how I do live my life.
One thing I have to ask you about, one of the chapters in your book is called The Divorce Diet. Tell me about the divorce diet. Is this a low calorie, low carb, high protein diet? I mean, what do you eat on the divorce diet?
Nothing. You eat
Nothing.
You cry. You cry with snot running down your face and snot. You cry. You can't eat. Your gut is turned inside out. Some people, for me, I'm one of those. When I'm stressed or overwhelmed, I can't eat. Others are overeaters. But typically in most cases of divorce, at least the women that I've seen go through it, they lose a ton of weight because you're just so overwhelmed and you're so stressed and your hair falls out and this and that. And then you discover this little physique underneath and you go, ooh la la. And hello ladies, it's not there to stay. It's just an illusion. Because once life starts evening out, if your habits were unhealthy prior to that, if you didn't work out, didn't take care of yourself, you're going to go back to that. It will revert back to your old habits. So what I'm saying is with the divorce diet, when you get that springboard of losing weight initially, use that as a springboard to changing up your lifestyle, to adopting healthier practices and healthy eating habits. You don't have to break the bank to eat healthy, and start working out. Keep that. Use it as a springboard to start working out, doing a couch to 5K program, just being physically active. It helps you if you have kids to be physically active with them. You get to do more things. I run with my oldest son. We do races together, 5K races, just staying healthy. And the serotonin that you get from that, it's such a happy drug.
It's a wonderful drug.
It's a wonderful drug, and it stimulates so many parts of your creativity and your brain capacity. It's phenomenal if you can keep that going.
I often see in my male friends, someone who I haven't seen for a while, and I'll say, John, man, you've lost 30 pounds. You look fantastic. How did you do it? He said, I'm going through a divorce. And my immediate response is, well, that's kind of an expensive way to lose weight. Expensive and painful.
Absolutely.
But there's always this irony that when people suddenly, a man or a woman is finding himself or herself back out on the market, so to speak. And this goes, obviously, the divorce diet you're talking about is one of stress where you can't eat, you're just emotionally devastated. But then there's that other diet where people become motivated to start eating healthy and to start exercising because they're saying, hey, I got to look good because I'm going back out there. I'm going to be out there on the shelf. I'm on life's eBay. I want to look good.
Life's eBay.
Now there's a disconnect, I think, for a lot of people where people, when they find themselves in the situation now where suddenly they're single again, they'll do things that they wouldn't have done for themselves and maybe for their spouse, that they should have done when they were married. That's an interesting perception, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is. I guess because I don't want to sound salesy, but...
Well, that's okay. I'm a sales guy. I like when people are salesy.
Sales. In essence, you competing. You're sort of putting yourself on the market of what is out there. For me, I am the same of what I was when I went through it and how I am today. And I was active before. I'm still active today. And it's always been a priority. And I'm a little different to the norm because I really have come to a space where I really don't care of what the next person thinks or sees me or how I am. I am who I am. You're either going to like me or not. I don't have to compete for attention or vie for someone's affection. We're either in this or we're not. That's
you had to get to that point, though, right? I mean, you didn't feel that way. You didn't feel that way initially.
No, initially I always had a healthy dose of confidence. I really did. It was muted under this sense, and this is a big thing that women struggle with, and I certainly was one of them. You want a whole family. You want this intact family. You don't want your kids to grow up in a broken home. And so you compromise so much of what is your true value and what intrinsically is going against everything that you stand for and believe in prior to having kids or even prior to having a marriage. And you compromise on that for the sake of the kids. And for me, it came to a point where I couldn't compromise this anymore because I was living in a shell of who I was and of who I want to be. And the only way to get out of the shell was to break free into who I am, who I was.
So that leads to the next question I want to ask you. Tell me and the listeners, what's good about divorce? Out of everything you've been through, tell me what the best thing about divorce is.
Coming out and knowing who you are, and then not just knowing who you are, but really liking who you are, really loving who you are. The good thing about divorce, I'm not going to lie, every other weekend you are free. The good thing about divorce is being free, being truly free. It's like a weight off your shoulders. And you can only get to that point if you forgive. If you truly forgive, and forgive yourself for maybe staying in it too long when you knew you should have left sooner, forgiving your ex-spouse for whatever the discrepancies was, for whatever the fault was on their end for hurting you or disappointing you, just forgiving.
And
once you can get to that point of true forgiveness yourself and the other person, and accepting that this is the way things are now, then life is really extraordinary. It really is. You will have ups and downs. That's life. But to know that you are doing it authentically you, with no harboring of any ill will or any residual vindictiveness, that to me is just phenomenal.
And I got to say, from a personal perspective, both myself and everyone else I've ever known who has gone through divorce, the subsequent relationships that they developed were always better for them. They were more careful about choosing the right person, someone who was their match. Personally, I met my soulmate, and that never would have happened had I stayed married to the first person, who was a wonderful person. Mm-hmm. But again, I think we were on those parallel paths that you described that were never really coming together. In fact, they became more divergent. We got along fine. We never argued. We never fought. There was no infidelity, but there was just this going in different directions. But I met someone who I've been with now for 27, 28 years, who's just so much better suited for me. And that is a wonderful thing. What is, with respect to going through the experience of divorce, what was the number one piece of advice that you would like to share with our listeners, for anyone who might be considering this or who's going through it?
To accept what's happening. Don't wish it away. Don't dig your head in the sand. Don't be the ostrich. Just accept what's happening and allow yourself that time to process it before you react, before you make any decisions. Allow yourself to take in what is going on and accept and let go of any expectations. Have no expectations.
Is there a favorite quote that helped you through the experience?
Yes, there is. It's by an author named Mary Ann Redmacher. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but it says, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is that quiet voice at the end of the day that says, I will start again tomorrow." And I would look at that every night before I turned out the kitchen lights and look at that and go, okay, today is done. Tomorrow, I will give it another shot. And tomorrow, I will give it another shot. And tomorrow, I will give it another shot. And it gets better. It really, truly gets better. Life gets sweeter. Life gets sweeter. It was the most hardest thing I could have done, but the most exhilarating thing I could have done, all in the same breath, if that makes any sense at all. Well,
I love the quote, Janice. Courage doesn't roar. You can review the show notes at www.imgivingnotice.com/4. Janice, your book, where can we get a copy of? Well, I already have a copy of your book, but where can the listeners get a copy of your book?
On Amazon. They can get it on a Kindle form or a paperback on Amazon.
Okay, and I will put a link to that on the website. Any parting words of advice from here? You've given such great content. A last thing you would like to share with our listeners?
I would say that to get through this process, you really need to find that strength in something higher than you. For me, that resonated as God. I don't know what it is for the listener, but for me, that relationship, that quiet and solitude moments that I had in prayer, in whether it was reading scripture or walking on the beach, or whatever information or whatever literature speaks to them, builds them up, that was my sound, that was my solace, that was my peace, that was my guiding light through all of this. And I could not have gotten through it without that.
Find your higher purpose, find your higher meaning, find something bigger than yourself, and it will help you get through it.
Absolutely.
Janice, before we end, I just have to ask you a question which I don't think I got a clear answer to earlier. Mm-hmm. Who inspired you to write the book?
It was the many women that came my way through my divorce attorney that she would send, go and have a chat with Janice. Go and see how, just to get a handle on your emotions, on your clarity, and how to get through it, how to get through mediation, how to get through court without falling apart and being a ball of emotional mess. And every time these women, they would ask me the same questions, and it was the same things. And I thought, you know what? I need to put this down. And I had a prompting over the last summer for quite a while in my spirit that I was going to write a book. I just didn't know what it was. And I was running one day and I got the title. And I went, what? Okay. And I literally stopped running, made a note on my iPhone, and kept on going. And that was in mid-July. And I kind of mulled over it. And then finally I got this overwhelming sense that I needed to do it, but I didn't know how. And then I took some time off from my work, and I sat down and I did it. And believe it or not, it was so divinely guided that all the chapters, everything about it, it all came, and I didn't have to strain. Writing was my full-time job. Everything flowed very, very well. And I wrote it. And before I knew it, the last word was inspired, it was written, and the book was done.
Janice, your book is Divorce, the New Little Black Book, a guide through the process of divorce. Thank you so much for being with me today on the I'm Giving Notice podcast.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Mace. It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute delight and a pleasure. I hope I gave the listeners some tidbits and some charge actions to go forward and do their biggest blessing in disguise like mine was.
Well, you certainly did, and I certainly don't wish anyone to go through a divorce. It's not a wonderful thing. May you find the right person who you could spend the rest of your life with.
Yes.
But if for some reason you find yourself with someone who is not the ideal person and you're really not happy and you're having all those questions, then you might want to pick up Janice's book, read through it. It may inspire you to ask the right questions about your relationship and ultimately come out the other side a happier and a better person. So thanks again, Janice.
Thank you.
Again, the book will be listed on the show notes at www.imgivingnotice.com/4, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
This has been the I'm Giving Notice podcast with Mace Horoff. For show notes and more information about how you can take control of life's big three, please visit www.imgivingnotice.com.